Um, Assalamu alaikum. It's really a pleasure to sit in front of you. I am personally a voter of PTI and I'll be ever. My question is regarding Afghanistan. It's been after 2-decade-long war of US against Afghanistan. Taliban have turned to power now, which wasn't supported by leftists in Pakistan because they saw them as a source of terrorism. Now, we Pakistanis are again facing a wave of terrorism, and Islamabad is on high alert. So, how do you see the Taliban in Afghanistan, and how do you think that the current security threat which Pakistan is facing now is has something to do with Afghan Taliban also? Also, you have supported a lot of laws like blasphemy law and religion-based laws, but on the same time, you have criticized a lot of religious parties which were in the coalition. So how do you see the role of religion in the politics? Thank you so much.
Okay, so first of all, you must differentiate between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistan Taliban. The Afghan Taliban are completely different. You know, their aims and objectives are completely different to the TTP, which is the Pakistan Taliban. Who were the Pakistan Taliban? When the Afghan Jihad was conducted from the soil of Pakistan, it was conducted to what was called the tribal areas of Pakistan, or FATA. Now, these were areas adjoining the Afghan border. And all the sort of incursions into Afghanistan by the Mujahideen were from the tribal area. And a lot of the fighters also from Pakistan were from the tribal areas. And there were Pashtuns, which were the Pakistani. You know, you must remember, Afghanistan is 50% Pashtun, and 2/3 of Pashtun live in Pakistan. And most of them along the border, the eastern border of Afghanistan. So therefore, there was a lot of Pashtun sympathy for the Afghan Jihad. So hence, from the tribal area, the border adjoining Afghanistan, that's where the fighters used to go in, and the Mujahideen used to operate. So when come 9/11, Afghanistan gets invaded by the Americans. Now Pakistan government took the stand, which I opposed. We should have stayed neutral. They started supporting the US war on terror. And so the same people who had been fighting jihad against the Soviets because they were foreign invaders now were told that because it's the US, if you fight against them, it's terrorism. So they turned against the Pakistan government. And so what we had was, in tribal areas, the people turning against the Pakistan government, and they were called the TTP, the Pakistan Taliban. And so there were two different things. Afghanistan Taliban were not connected with them. I mean, they were connected vaguely, but not really. There was not real connection with them. So what happened was that after Kabul fell to the Taliban last August, the Pakistan Taliban were then asked by the Afghan Taliban to go back into Pakistan. And unfortunately, that was a great time for us my government was already negotiating with them so that we would do a resettlement of these people, because there were about 40,000 people which were moving into Pakistan, amongst them about 5,000 to 10,000 fighters, but their families too. So unfortunately, when my government went, the eye was taken off the ball, and the new government and the setup, our military establishment did not pay enough attention to what was happening with the resettlement of the Taliban coming in. And so therefore we have this wave of terrorism coming in now, and this is all along what was the former FATA, the former tribal areas, because they've got merged into Pakistan. So we have a wave of terrorism in Pakistan right now, and this needs to be dealt with before it goes out of hand. Now I come to what you're talking about, religious parties and religious laws. Look, let me first tell you about the blasphemy law. The blasphemy law was not made by Pakistan, it was made by the British when they were ruling India. And the idea of the blasphemy law was that if one religious community, and remember there were multi-religious communities living in villages. There were Hindus, there were Sikhs, there were Muslims, there were Christians. So if one religious community said something which was derogatory against another religious community of a sacred entity, so there would be riots, there would be a lot of people killed. So the British then brought in this blasphemy law that you were not allowed to say anything derogatory about any religious entity of any other religion. That's how it came about, to stop riots. So therefore, rather than there being lynching crowds and lynching mobs going on and killing people, say, who thought that their religion blasphemy had been committed against them, now it was an offense, so you had to actually go to court to prove that. So that was to stop mob violence, lynching crowds. So Pakistan basically inherited the policy. And in Pakistan, it makes sense because we have different religions here. And we have had in the past, when someone thinks that our religion has been blasphemed, there've been mob violence. There've been people lynched. And this now is an offense in Pakistan because you have to prove that it's blasphemy. And for that, you have to go to a court.
Very well. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next question is about Turkey. And we have with us Dr. Yasin Aktay. Dr. Aktay is a professor at Bayezid Yildirim University, and also he is a former member of parliament and widely known here in Turkey. Dr. Aktay.
First of all, thank you very much for sharing your very, very valuable perspective with us, and thank to SIGA for gathering us together in this platform. For the past 2 decades, Turkey has become an important and rising power, not only in its region, but also in the Muslim world. I think you can share this idea, this view. The relationship between Pakistan and Turkey is the lasting legacy of Pan-Islamism. The story is well known, as you know. Muslims in the subcontinent supported the Turkish people with their bodies and wealth during the height of colonialism. But in reality today, the Turkish-Pakistan relationship is a failure from many angles. The historical nostalgia has been manipulated by NATO interests, as it was dominated and controlled by the military through the Cold War years. Today, it has resulted in nothing tangible. No visa-free travel, no free trade agreement, no military alliance, no free technology transfer agreement, no people-to-people cooperation, etc. Now my question is coming. Do you feel Pakistan has benefited from Turkey's rise? And if so, how? And do you envision a strategic partnership beyond rhetoric between the two important Muslim states? And lastly, what other Muslim states do you see as strategic partners to Pakistan? Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me say that there's a people-to-people relationship between the people of Turkey and Pakistan. And this, again, what you quite rightly pointed out in history, was at a time when in Turkey, the Western powers or European powers were about to take over in the 20s or late 1919s and 1920. At the time we were fighting, a lot of the Muslims of India and what is now Pakistan collected a lot of money, and they gave they were standing with the people of Turkey, and I think that's what is remembered in the Turkish mindset. So the relationship is very deep. When I became the Prime Minister, with President Erdogan, I had a very good relationship, and we were trying our best to further our contacts. I was only in power for 3.5 years, and in that time, unfortunately, Corona came in. The 2 years were basically 1.5 years were lost in the coronavirus, and so for our first year we had a bankrupt country, so we were trying to be solvent. So basically, in the last couple of years, we were trying to form what you call trade relationship. We had a committee formed by the president dealing with the committee formed by me in Pakistan to further our contacts, our relationship. It was quite a relationship which covered a wide area of things. And unfortunately that, when my government was removed, we were just deepening our relationship, and there were various political crises which kept coming on the way. And but I do feel that for the future, the relationship with Pakistan and Turkey will grow. Look, Pakistan has gone through a bad period in the last 30 years. We lost our momentum of growth. Pakistan just did not live up to its economic potential. We had two terrible governments of two political families who ruled us for 30 years. And they're still here. They've been in power for 8 months. And they have basically run this country into the ground. So Pakistan in the 60s was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And especially in the developing world, Pakistan was given as an example. A lot of countries followed Pakistan's model in the 60s, Malaysia, South Korea. We were considered a model. And as I said, unfortunately, in the last 3 decades, we lost that momentum because, we had very poor governance. So looking ahead, I think Pakistan and Turkish relationship has tremendous potential. And we were discussing, there were a lot of mutual areas which we could benefit each other, because there's a lot of strengths in Pakistan which are we have potential, but we haven't realized them. But in Turkey, we were working out on how mutually we could benefit each other through trade.
Thank you very much. I can't leave this without mentioning that you and President Erdogan, and I believe also the President of Iran, were talking about how to confront Islamophobia. Say, in 1 minute, what project do you think the 3 countries should embark upon to confront this rising problem of Islamophobia?
You see, Islamophobia, let me just give you I'm just going to be very quick about this. This all started when the Iranian Revolution took place. There was a fear in the Western countries that all Muslim countries will be taken over by Islamic revolutions. And so they divided the Muslim world between moderates and fundamentalists. And in 1989, when Salman Rushdie, or sometime then when Salman Rushdie wrote that book, Satanic Verses, there was a wave of anger in the Muslim countries. The West could not understand why were the Muslims so upset, because they, especially Europeans, their idea of religion, or the way they treat, for instance, Jesus Christ, is completely different to the way Muslims love and respect and revere our Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And they couldn't understand this. And the Muslim world never explained to them why were they so upset. And so that added to this suspicion about Islam. And then, of course, 9/11 took place. So after that, Islam was equated with terrorism. For somehow, suicide attacks were only by Muslims, because we were supposed to be these radical people. And unfortunately, the worst role was played by the heads of Muslim states. Everyone, rather than trying to explain to the Western countries that, look, radicals, moderates, and liberals are in every human community. There is no such thing as radical Islam or Islamic terrorism. These were terms given to create the impression that somehow terrorism and radicalism was connected with Islam. And the Muslim heads of state were so keen to become all moderates and liberals just to please the Western countries, they never explained to them that there is only one Islam, and that is of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And unfortunately, we never ever helped fight Islamophobia. We never, by never explaining anything to them. So Muslims in Western countries suffered a lot after 9/11, because, as I said, Islam was equated to terrorism. And there was this radical Islam. Muslims kept saying, we're all against radical Islam. But how was the man in the West ever supposed to understand the difference between moderate and liberal Islam? So they thought of all of Muslims as terrorists. So now what needs to be done is that OIC must take the premier role in this to explain to Western countries. They must form a body of scholars which will be able to speak to the Western countries in their own language. So to make them understand, you know, the differences, what causes problems between and what causes Islamophobia. And I feel that can be done. And I also feel that, you know, Al Jazeera, TRT, channels that can sort of give the Islamic version to the Western countries are very important. They need to have material which will explain to the Western countries about Islam. Majority of the people in the West do not understand Islam. And the problem is that it can be manipulated by those people who are anti-Islam. So they can manipulate this ignorance against us. And that's why it is very important communication through media, and OIC should take responsibility for this.
Thank you so much. I want to remind all the participants that we need to move faster because the time of the chairman is quite precious. And the next person we have is Nasruzzaman Naeem. He is the head of the Bangladeshi Student Association in Turkey and also a PhD student at Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for giving me the opportunity. As we are talking of the Ummah today, let's turn to an issue closer to home. As we all know that both Bangladesh and Pakistan contains a significant proportion of Muslim population in the world today. But it is unfortunate and it is apparent that the relationships between Bangladesh and Pakistan are not good. So why is this the case in your opinion? Also, we often speak about the brotherly relationships between Muslim majority countries, but all of those talks are actually empty. So as a politician, what is your vision regarding Bangladesh? And also as a politician, what would you suggest as way forwards to improve the relationship between Bangladesh and Pakistan in near future? Thank you.
Well, first of all, the reason why our relationship has not grown or improved is because of sadly the events of 1970-71, when the ruling party, the party that should have been given government, the majority party was not given, was not allowed to have its mandate and form government in Pakistan. And that led to the break of Pakistan and the formation of Bangladesh. But unfortunately, the events that followed, the military operation which followed, that created that deep, what should I say, not animosity, but it created that distance between the two countries because of the suffering which took place because of the military action. So my government, I reached out to the Bangladesh Prime Minister, and I also invited her to Pakistan. But the relationship is not what it ought to be. It should be a much better relationship. There have been periods in which the relationship seems to have thawed, but for some reason the relationship has not grown. But I do agree with you that as two of probably the countries with the biggest population, Muslim populations, we should have far better relationship than it is right now.
Thank you very much. Our next question is about Palestine, and it will be asked by Mr. Jalal Shaib, who is a senior research associate at the Center for Islamic Global Affairs. Jalal?
Thank you, Doctor. Assalamu alaikum. My question is regarding the Palestinian cause and the normalization with Israel. And as you know, all of you, the cause is witnessing now the worst days. If we look back to the history, we see each state in the Muslim world which normalized its relationships with Israel found for itself like an excuse under the big name, the umbrella, the realpolitik. Some of them make the excuse of to avoid foreign pressures. Some of them to get back their own land, like Egypt and Camp David. Some of them to seize another land, like what happened last 2 years in Abraham Accords. Some of them to get to win and to gain stability or prosperity inside. Some of them to get protection from foreign threats, like some of the Gulf states and Iran. But in all the cases, those states were the winners and still the winners. And the loser, unfortunately, is the Palestinian cause. Now, as we know, Pakistan is still suffering from the Kashmir problem, more international pressures, and instability inside. My question to you, Mr. Imran Khan, can you assure millions of Muslims and people across the world that Pakistan, under the leadership of Mr. Imran Khan, will never sacrifice Palestinian rights and Jerusalem, and will never normalize the relationships with the Zionist state under any excuse? Thank you.
Well, you know, the founder of Pakistan, who we call Quaid-e-Azam, the great leader, you know, he in 1948 gave a statement on Palestine, and he spoke about the injustice which was being done to the people of Palestine. And he was very clear that Pakistan would not accept or would not recognize Israel as long as the people of Palestine were not given justice. So that has been basically the line of all Pakistani heads of state since then. And secondly, we have the issue of Palestine is almost exactly the same as the people of Kashmir. So the moment we give up, you know, our principal stand on the recognition of Israel, means that we give up on Kashmir too, because the issues are more or less the same. Then United Nations Security Council resolutions, which are more or less the same on Kashmir as well as Palestine. And you know, if we say that the moment we recognize Israel, then we have abandoned the people of Palestine for them to get a just settlement for a homeland. And then we cannot take a stand for the people of Kashmir either. So therefore, I don't think any Pakistani head of state will ever recognize Israel, no matter how tempting it is, because Israel is powerful in the sense it has huge influence in the United States. So United States being a superpower, every country wants to have a good relationship with them. So the temptation is that if you are friendly, if you recognize Israel, you will have good relationship with the US. But the problem in Pakistan is that it's a democratic country, and anyone who wants to go to the people, he knows that the public will never accept any head of state who's recognized Israel.
Thank you very much. We have 3 short questions, if you may. Thank you very much for staying with us. The next one is going to be Salman Sayyid, who is professor at the University of Leeds. And he is with us online. Very quickly, Dr. Sayyid. You're muted.
One of your greatest achievements has been the popular mobilization of unprecedented scale in Pakistan. And I just want to ask you that how will you harness this popular will, not just to demand new and fair elections, but also to replace the corrupt current corrupt system inherited from the colonizers?
You see, the problem, most of the developing world, or what you call the ex-colonies, all of us, the problems we faced are the same. We have struggled to establish rule of law, justice. I mean, justice means rule of law. Rule of law means that everyone is equal before the law. And when you have colonialism, basically the colonials are above law. And in Pakistan, unfortunately, and like most of the developing, like most of the ex-colonial countries, when they got their independence, the rulers mostly took the role of the colonizers, and they put themselves above law. And so when you do not have rule of law, corruption becomes one of the biggest symptoms of lack of rule of law, because the powerful elite goes above law, and when they start making money, the state institutions cannot check their corruption. And that's how countries become poor, not because of lack of resources, but the corruption of the ruling elite. That bankrupts countries, and that's the case with almost the entire developing world. It's certainly the case with Pakistan. We suffer because after colonialism, either we had military dictatorship, half the time we were ruled by military dictators, and military dictators clearly, when they take over a country, when they decide to impose martial law, they break the constitution. It's against the constitution and the rule of law. But unfortunately, when we've had civilian governments, so-called democratic governments, they also have put themselves above law, and which is why they have been able to make so much money through corruption and take the money abroad. And it's the same story in almost all the developing world. What you have in the developing countries are the ruling elites siphoning off money and taking it abroad. And that's how, if you ask me, one reason why Pakistan, which was rising rapidly and could not achieve its potential, should have been one of the big economies in the world. One reason is that we just did not have justice in our country. We had the ruling elite put itself above law. And when you have ruling elite above law, when the powerful cannot be held accountable by your institutions of justice, then the country becomes a third world country. It becomes eventually a banana republic.
Thank you so much. I want to quickly give the floor to one of our senior professors, Dr. Munzir Kahaf, who is a professor of Islamic economics here at Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University. Professor Kahaf.
Okay, thank you. Of course, I thank SIGA and I thank you, Mr. Former Prime Minister, for being with us. But I really, you mentioned about the miracle of China and other examples, and of course things vary from one country to another. You can't really apply the same model in repeating it as it came from China, for instance. Now, what is your model? What is your program for economic development in Pakistan? And especially, I want you to also be a bit specific on a few points. How would you fight corruption that is not really among the elite, but it had reached even the smallest employee in government or in any corporation even? And also, how would you envision the new economy in Pakistan, development-wise and Islamization-wise, especially with the Supreme Court decision of elimination of interest? So
okay. Let me just say that in Pakistan, if what I was trying to do when I was in power, but only for 3.5 years, and what I will again try and do, number one is imposing rule of law. Establishing rule of law is the beginning of prosperity. I believe that countries that are prosperous, if there is rule of law in a country, it cannot have poverty. If you look at the map, if you just look at the rule of law index all over the world, the countries which have a rule of law index above 80 or 90% are all prosperous. have no poverty. And we, most of our countries, I mean, if you look at Nigeria, has the greatest amount of oil reserves in Africa, and yet it has huge poverty. But on rule of law index, Nigeria is 7%. So it is directly related. If you have rule of law, you have prosperity, because it unleashes the potential of a society. You have investment coming into your country. Investment always comes into countries which clean governance. And capital flies from countries which do not have a governance, which don't have rule of law, which have poverty. So number one, and that is going to be the hardest thing to establish. Number one is rule of law, and rule of law will tackle the ruling elite. But Professor, your other 2 points, you know, the verse in the Quran about Amar bil Maruf wa Nahi Anil Munkar, which says enjoin the good and forbid what is bad. In other words, the moral society, the moral values of a society matter a lot, because when you make corruption unacceptable, when you stand up for the good, you know what? Strangely enough, some of the Western countries of Switzerland, Europe, Scandinavia, they actually work on Amar bil Maruf. The society rejects what is bad. You know, the society fights. So corruption at the lower levels can be fought and what we started in Pakistan was the teachings of the Holy Prophet, Sirat-e-Nabi, because that's what teaches you ethics. And unfortunately, we haven't taught our children ethics through the Sirat-e-Nabi, because the Prophet's life, the way he established the state of Medina, the way he raised the morality of the society, the way he established the rule of law by saying even if my daughter steals, she will be punished. That countries before you have been destroyed, where the powerful, when they stole, were not punished, and only the poor, weak crooks were punished. And this is, you know, the problem, I repeat, not in Pakistan, all over the developing world. And next is education. You see, in Muslim societies, education has to be considered sacred, as it was at the time of the Prophet. You know, we have not paid enough attention to education towards research and technology. And this is what I was trying to do in Pakistan. We were going to set up excellences of center in technology, because the future is technology. But eventually a country has to be sovereign. I believe that a country must stand its own feet, have dignity and self-respect, and that's what gives it strength. Because, you know, you rely on your own resources. A human being that walks on crutches, his legs will waste away. If the bigger weight we lift, it strengthens us. Same with human societies. If you start depending on aid, which we have, and if you depend on foreign loans and IMF, you would never really learn how to stand on your own feet. So a sovereign country is the key for me for success.
Thank you so much for this. This is the last question, Mr. Prime Minister, and it's from one of our sisters and concerning the empowerment of women. Dr. Yasmin Saib is also a research fellow here at the Center for Islamic Global Affairs. Dr. Yasmin?
Your Excellency, thank you so much for giving us your time today. I think it's important for us to end this discussion by addressing the question of women and women's empowerment. As we have seen recently, incidents in Iran as well as in Afghanistan. Many people have argued that no matter what, Muslim countries can never give women freedom and dignity. That's some of the prevailing arguments that we hear. And so I'd like to know how do you view this issue, and how would you accomplish this matter in a society that is quite traditional and conservative in many regards, also in a balanced way without falling into what I would say, Western liberal ideologies or traps even. Thank you.
Okay, so look, first of all, I do believe that, the revolution, what our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did 1500 years ago was a revolution, because he revolutionized the society. There were new concepts that came in, but one of them was he gave rights to women. We don't, we forget that long before the idea of women's rights in Western countries, 1500 years ago, rights were given to women, and in the last sermon of the Holy Prophet, he was very clear. He said, men have rights over women as women have rights over men. So the concept and dignity, of women. So in Muslim societies, if you look at Muslim societies, yes, sometimes when the idea, the whole idea of parda is such, which I feel that we haven't done enough ijtihad on, enough debate on it. But the whole idea of parda for me was protecting the family system, because Islam was very clear that the basis of human society is the family system. So in protecting the family system, the concept of parda came. But unfortunately, we never developed these concepts so that we can protect our family system as well as not stop the potential of our women to grow. And Muslim societies are still developing these concepts. Unfortunately, we have two extremes right now. On one side, we have women who are in the name of parda banned from public life. On the other hand, we have the Western liberal ideas about women's liberation. So I believe that Islam is what we call the middle way. Islam is not a religion of extremes. It says in the Quran it's a religion of the middle way. But we haven't developed that middle way because there has not been enough research and not enough of debate in Muslim societies of finding that middle way. I do not believe that, the idea when they say the Western idea of the liberation of women, it's almost a competition between a man and a woman in the West now. I don't think Islam is much more the idea of a complementary relationship between a man and a woman. And that in Pakistan, in our conservative societies, I think gradually we are finding our way. But one thing that should not happen is, there's a clear verse in the Quran that there is no coercion in religion. You can't force people into religion. So when you do that, it doesn't, human beings have to be, the heart and the mind has to be won over. You can't force human beings through, through force to follow religious edicts, and it creates problems. It will always create problems. So I'm one of those who believes that it's through dialogue, through debate, through making people understand the true teachings of our Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think that's the way you win over people.